Okay, so let's get going with today's webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. There's still a few coming in, but I'll just get going so we keep the time frame. So my name is Anja Paget. I work with the log, and today we're going to have a look back at 2024, and of course, try and see if we can look a bit into the future in terms of 2025, what we expect. So today, most of the talking is going to be by my co-host today, Marie from Dansk Erhverv, and she'll take you through a bit of what's been happening in 2024, and of course, try and see if we can spot what will happen in 2025. And then, of course, as always, you're more than welcome to ask any questions. We have the Q&A where you just pop in your question, and I'll ask the question to Marie, and then we'll just take it from there. I do have questions as well, which we'll take in the end. So let's just kick off this session first of all by presenting Marie. If you can say a little bit about yourself and your role at Dansk Erhverv.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Marie, and thank you for having me today, Anja. I'm working as a political consultant at Dansk Erhverv, so the Danish Chamber of Commerce, and I basically represent our members, which are textile companies, both representing mainly retail in clothing, lifestyle, and also footwear. So it's a broad range of very large companies, retailers mostly, and also very small ones. So basically I'm working on communicating what is happening, making sure that the legislations, both the existing ones that are changing, but also upcoming ones, that they're up to date, knowing what's going to affect and how it will affect their practices here in Denmark. And it's especially with a focus on anything related to environmental, climate and due diligence legislation.
Perfect, and absolutely why we invited you here today. So let's just kick it off, and just I forgot to say that we of course as always share the slides, and we'll also share the recording afterwards. So you'll get everything afterwards. You don't have to take pictures or memory everything. You'll get it afterwards as well. So I'll just let me know when you want me to shift the screen, and
Yes, absolutely. So, well, I will basically just take you through a brief, let's say, recap of or dive into the textile industry of what has been happening the past couple of years and where we're heading. And afterwards, we'll dig a bit more into detail into these areas. So basically, compared to a lot of other industries, and you might know this very well, some of you have heard it before, some of you have maybe not, so bear with me. We're basically transitioning from being a very non-regulated industry to become a very regulated industry. And it is a tough transition period for sure. But we also need to acknowledge that it's necessary, especially when we zoom out a bit and look to the left and to the right. The toy industry, medicine, food, all these kinds of products that have actually been through the same practice, transitioning from something called soft law, where it's more, let's say, voluntary practices and suggestions on how you can improve things, to actually legally binding laws. And we know for a fact that usually hard law works better if it's implemented right. So that's what we're going through right now. I guess a lot of, or the first sustainability consultants, managers have been maybe drafting a code of conduct. Now we're actually moving into hardcore data gathering, data reporting, compliance practices. So that's what we're working on right now. You can go on to the next slide. And yeah, just as I mentioned, it's been mainly focused on codes of conduct. That was kind of the start of this transition. There's been focus on the UN Global Compact, the Sustainable Development Goals, and all of these are great initiatives, but it doesn't really it doesn't create a level playing field, because some will do it and some won't. And in the end, it's all about surviving and running a business. So we're now moving into actually implementing regulations and directives. And for those of you who are not familiar with these terms, which is totally fair, a directive is to make it more understandable, something that we implement a bit differently in the national member states. So they can vary a bit. So it's just basically gives the direction of what is the target and what is the aim of the new law, where are we heading, what is important. So it kind of sets the frame, whereas the regulation is being implemented the very same way in every single member state. And there are some pros and cons about both types of legislations. But so some of the upcoming, let's say, laws or requirements that you will be facing are going to be regulations, and some will be directives. And let's say a positive thing about directives, for example, is that you can, because the infrastructure and the economy varies so much from member state to member state, and the market you put your products on, that sometimes the whole infrastructure or the price makes more sense to adapt to the country itself. Yes, you can go on to the next slide. And this is just to reference or maybe visualize, make an illustration of what you probably are experiencing out there. We call it a tsunami of legislation. It's just because it's so much at the same time, and it can feel a bit overwhelming. We're probably a little swimmer or surfer in that dark corner there that is trying to survive or ride the wave, as we can call it, to kind of keep up, both understand what's happening, know how to prioritize, and also in the end implement them. And that requires resources, right? And a lot of backing up from the board of directors and so on. To illustrate it a bit more differently, I've put the EU in the corner, and that's why we're implementing a lot of things in the EU, while the rest of the world is maybe more loose on these things, and that creates a lot of issues for it. I'm gonna finish off this presentation also with a similar slide to just illustrate a bit more what we're experiencing in terms of what products we're actually allowing to get in the EU market, and which distorts your competition big time. So these are a lot of abbreviations that some of you might be very familiar with, but it's basically everything from chemicals, PFAS, to green claims, so communication marketing, the digital product passport, the product environmental footprint, all the due diligence legislation, financial reporting, labeling, and so on. You can move on. And this is just to illustrate it a bit more differently. We've just basically made sure to make it more understandable where it comes from. So it's all basically it lies under the EU Green Deal, which was made a couple of years ago, where it's basically a legislation package which aims at reaching climate neutrality by 2030. And there are a lot of initiatives under this, and some deal more with the financial part, some deal more with the climate, environment, circular economy, and so on. It's just to kind of understand where they are placed and how they fit together. Yes, and I'm not going to go into detail here. This is also for free use if you haven't seen it yet, but this is just to kind of showcase a bit more into detail when things will have been suggested, when they will be implemented, how long the implementation period takes, and who it will apply for, what size of company or what turnover they have. So we receive a lot of questions about when will what happen, basically, and this is to show a bit more in specific, to get an overview of the from us handpicked regulations, because it doesn't cover all. That is also important to say, but it gives an overview of the ones we for sure cover, because we deem them to be very relevant. And so we update them on a regular basis, let's say every 3 months, to make sure that it's accurate. And obviously there can be some changes that we haven't adapted to yet, but this is just to showcase the timeline that is obviously very crucial for you who are supposed to implement these things. And on the website, we've also listed all the different regulations and directives with a small, what is it called? Small description of what it means. You can go to the next. Yes, and this is just a few add-ons, let's say, some more regulations and directives that are also relevant for retail. And this is just to extend our overview. I'm not necessarily the lead on these, but this is just to complement the picture a bit more with some other legislations, because we know that you're not only concerned with environmental and climate laws and some, yeah, this is obviously also for food and so on. Yes, and then I tried to mainly categorize what we're looking into and what kind of initiatives or what the intention actually is and the purpose because we of these upcoming legislations, because I think we tend to I can very often sense some kind of panic and or stress about what's coming up, and I really understand it. It's easier for me to sit on the other side of the table, obviously, even though I've been on that on the company side too. But what we aim at, and I'm not going to dig it too much into this because we will, I think, go through it in the Q&A, is to actually create a reduction of our footprint, right? And we're hoping, and that's what we're working for, and that's also our role at the Danish Chamber, to make sure that these legislations and the work you will put into this make sense. And so I've just tried to kind of visualize here or write down what the aim of these different requirements are, that you will put into practice to kind of also showcase this is actually a lot about transparency. It's a lot about collecting data. When I'm asked how should you prepare, and we will get back to this also, it's mainly about data, all of these things, and it's because we're lacking data. So it makes sense, even though it can feel like a lot. It's also about fair competition, creating a level playing field. The textile labeling regulation, it's a lot of differing rules right now, and I think we're in a period where we need to change things, but we don't really know yet to what direction, which can create a feeling of a lot of disharmony. But in the end, and let's hope this will actually become a more level playing field for you, which is crucial for survival. It's about reducing packaging waste. It's about decreasing CO2 footprint. And reducing waste, but also implementing some good design practices. But in the end, I would say that the repeating intention is to create transparency in the industry. Yes, and this is to get back to the tsunami. This is just to say that we at the Danish Chamber of Commerce have used a lot of hours, let's say, quite a few years actually, on vocalizing the issue with online market platforms and incoming products that you're competing with in terms of the price that actually don't really live up to EU regulations, which is very problematic and quite, let's say, weird as well, that we actually allow them to enter the market even though they don't comply with our rules. So a Danish consumer should actually not be able to receive or order something to a Danish postal address that doesn't comply with the rules that you actually work on following very accurately. And we will see in the upcoming years, and you will know that too, that you will spend even more time on making sure that you're complying, while other companies, platforms actually breach these laws. And so they can work even faster, and this will create a greater discrepancy between you. And we know that for a fact that the Danish consumer likes to or is aware of issues, some at least, but when it comes to actually buying, it ends up being the price being the most important parameter. And so the choice of products, and we see it over and over again, we've done a lot of analysis, will fall on the product that is the cheapest. So this is a massive issue, and I think it's something where we actually have some hope that we can create a difference. in terms of both the environment, the climate, the whole due diligence, but then also the survival of Danish companies. So this is to illustrate all the Sheen products, and there is a lot more to it. The whole structure behind it, the whole development of policy, why we actually ended where we are. I'm not going to dig into that, but if you're curious, you're very welcome to reach out. But there are some different solutions that we've been working on, and yeah, let's hope that that is something the Commission is prioritizing in the next year.
Definitely.
And I think this is to kind of yeah, start the conversation.
Yes. Good. So I'm just gonna oops, stop sharing. There we go. Yeah, thank you so much, Marie. That was really insightful. So I think I will just kick off by just in general, because you work so much with different textile brands, companies in Denmark, and speak a lot to them, and of course host workshops, etc. with them. What is your sort of how do you see the businesses, like the whole textile industry, being impacted by this all these legislations? When you speak to them, how do you feel that they are impacted, maybe also in their daily lives as well?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and also you out there will know, this is just my experience, what I receive on my desk or when I meet them. But it's obviously a lot of smaller companies too, and they're often alone, which is a sign for me that there maybe haven't been prioritized enough resources to actually look into it, or a lack of understanding what it actually means, which is also understandable because it's new. But there is for sure it can seem a bit chaotic. It can seem a bit I think this uncertainty is a bit daunting and stressful, because we really like to let's say take all the companies with us from the very beginning of when a law is drafted, to make sure that we can come with input and influence it in the right way. But that also means that it can be a lot of bit back and forth, because a law, when it's drafted and actually comes into force, takes a long time, but it also has a lot of back and forth moments where we don't really know what's going to happen and how it will end up resulting. So I think there can be a lot of frustration as well. Stress and frustration about we want things, we require things, we want things to happen, but we don't really have the exact requirements, and I think that is quite problematic in my view. And it is also, the more you understand about the process, it also partly makes sense, because there are a lot of member states that need to be to agree on things, and yeah, the council, the parliament, and the commission. But it can be quite frustrating because I experience a very big will to change things, but it has to be made realizable and implementable, and I think we don't always, or politics don't always achieve that.
And it sort of seems like it's hard to grasp how in the daily practical work, how do you take all of this when it's not really ready yet, but you still need to get ready because it's a lot once it is there. So it sort of seems like a sort of parallel run between two entities to figure out something. The EU is figuring out how it should be, but all of the brands are as well actually trying to figure out how are we supposed to comply with all of this. So it's a parallel run, right? They have to get ready at the same time. I think is a very big frustration from them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And can you maybe also, because it's not only been 2024, it's been a couple of years now, more than a couple of years, in fact. How do you see sort of the challenges that they've had over these many years? How do you feel that they are coping with these challenges that they have?
I mean, I think especially lately, and now we're moving into some kind of implementation period. I think first it was to like maybe understand what's happening, and then it was a lot about prioritization. Where can we start? And now I would say it's very much about this kind of compliance practice, and again prioritization. What is the most important thing that I start with? what happens when, so I can kind of like make some kind of timeline for the company, um and actually like properly looking at the my inbox. I would say it's very clear, like it's very clear that the companies are very focused on the next thing. There is not really unless you're a big company and you have a lot of a big department working on this. It's very much hop from one thing to the next without actually having the time and resources, understandably, to look ahead. It's a bit of a rush, and we're working on making sure that on the date things are compliant. But that's all they can do. And so right now it's been a lot about the general product safety regulation because it entered into force, or it was applicable from the 13th of December, so last week. And so out of a sudden that had to be in order. So I think we can really see the challenge, or put into practice, it's jumping from one legislation to the other to make sure that they're the most compliant. But for sure, lack of resources in terms of changing a practice and maybe also digitalizing things. It depends, maybe not necessarily on the size, but also like how much data a company has, how close they are to their suppliers, the relation to their suppliers, the amount of suppliers. So I think it can vary a bit with the challenges from company to company, but for sure, the more data, the more digitalized, and the closer the work to the suppliers, the easier, for sure. And the ones that are starting from the very bottom, and maybe in addition have to convince some kind of leaders in the company to understand that this is important, but then also to kind of educate all kinds of colleagues in different departments, marketing, all these kind of different things that need to be on board, and supervise that the slogans they put on the website make sense, that the care label is on order. That can require a lot of time. So depending on the company and how it is set up, these are some of the issues.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess also I'm thinking, because there is so many now, you've showed the many different abbreviations and the whole overviews and everything. I guess there's also a fear of forgetting some of these very many lists of different abbreviations out there, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean that's what we work a lot on. So depending on how active you are, I think that the companies, the brands that are coming to our events regularly and are very engaged, I think they are quite on top of things. I would say that they know a lot. There is a lot of knowledge for sure. But that's just a handful, obviously. The ones that haven't started, maybe I don't necessarily see them. So we obviously try to make sure that as many come on board as possible, but we mainly work with the ones that are either on the forefront or have a very progressive or kind of like invested leadership. So yeah, it depends.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so if we look a bit ahead into and just focus a bit on this legislation again, so how do you think the EU's traceability requirements will really impact the textile supply chains? Do you have the sort of, especially the brands, of course, but especially their supply chains as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the traceability kind of lies in different regulations and directives. And as I said, a lot actually look into this and making sure that data is collected. And that is everything from eco design to the digital product passport, a lot actually, but also due diligence and so on. And maybe again back to the supply chain, how closely you work. I think that can help, but to properly answer your question, maybe I think it depends on the supplier, how progressive or how long ahead they are in terms of also them being able to gather data, and maybe how many and how big brands they've worked with before. A positive thing maybe is that a lot of companies want to keep their suppliers and maybe help them invest in changing and transitioning and making sure that they are compliant. But I obviously also hear that I mean, some are not capable at all of maybe either understand your requirements or are able to collect all this data. And then as a supplier or a retailer in the very end of the supply chain, it might be very hard, because in the end they are kind of they're supposed to be the ones who kind of blue stamp this thing and say this is all right, this is compliant. But it can be a very difficult practice to make sure to have everything in order when very low in the supply chain they are not capable of sending you the documents, or you are actually not sure if a sub supplier is just writing something or if it's actually legit. So let's hope that the way they set up the digital product passport, for example, can actually maybe help these practices. We don't know yet.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We don't know yet. And some of the key compliance challenges for textiles under the eco-design regulations, if we zoom in a bit on that one, can you maybe say a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, the eco design is a lot about, well, it's, as the name says, it's about designing. So the idea is to actually look at the whole value chain, which we haven't really done before in legislation. Mainly, we just focus on one, let's say, issue. But this time it's a lot about like actually looking at the production of a product and the design stage, which is obviously crucial, because that's what we should focus on more to make sure that we can actually reduce the footprint, because it doesn't only solving the waste problematic actually doesn't really help if we don't look at the whole supply chain from the beginning to the end. So it's a lot about making sure that the products that are designed can not only be recycled, which is often referred to, but actually are made so they can last a lot longer until they are recycled. And the recycling part is obviously crucial, but in the most important thing is obviously that we create some products that make sense to exist for a longer time than they have before. But that obviously requires that the whole system that we operate in also changes. And I think that is something that a lot of brands are struggling with, because in the end, it's all about minimum order quantities. It's about a whole setup that we work with that has been made to produce fast and in big volumes, quantities. And if we want to implement these things, we also need to change the system. And I can be a bit concerned about that, because obviously there are some things that we will put into practice that should help these dynamics. But if it's not, and I think that's where the frustration comes in a lot as well, that some things need to be changed also in the systematic approach and the way the industry is built up on some kind of premise of producing fast and big volumes, that these things kind of go together. It's very hard, and we can see a lot of brands that have failed creating something that maybe have more high quality products, because it's extremely expensive, and it should be possible to act on these requirements of creating garments that are more easily to repair, for example, and can stay in the loop longer. And obviously we want to try to not downcycle them, but have them in the loop as long as possible, and in the end that they're more easily to disassemble and make other products out of it.
Yeah, you're really tapping into sort of the whole business model of the industry that people need to look into, instead of trying to force something into an already existing. You actually use the fundamental business model of the industry, right? To be able to comply at least easier than you would if you try to fit it in as the usual way of doing it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then we tap into, because as you also said, in terms of it actually being quite small businesses that are also affected, or they at least feel affected with the trickle-down effect. Can you maybe elaborate a bit more on that? Because we are a lot of companies, at least especially in the Nordic countries as well, that we are a lot of small companies that try to comply. How is it affecting them? How are these small businesses now affected by all of these rules coming? Do you feel that also with the members of your?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, we can see that even though, for example, the very like the CSRD and the CSDDD are applying for very, very large companies. But in the end, they will have to do the whole reporting, and that is about looking at the whole supply chain. That is also about looking at the very last stage of the product when it is sold in the shop to the end consumer. And this is where their data is also important. It's also online platforms. If you sell your product at Boost, at Zalando, and so on, they need to report. So they will require data. And so they will send you an Excel sheet and ask for a lot of data points. So even though the legislation maybe is only applying for a certain size of company, it will still, as you were saying, trickle down to the very small ones in the end, because they will be asked, and they might also be asked by, if you're a B2B business, for example, by your business partners or your customers to provide data. So it is a practice that everyone needs to get on board with, no matter the size, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then tapping into, you say a lot about data. You can, of course, already say that that has something to do with technology. So how can they leverage, how can these textile companies leverage technology to meet these traceability requirements and other requirements that there are?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a tech expert. I might become in the future. Maybe you're more than me, but I guess I guess that it's a lot about maybe making your company fit for the different solutions.
Yeah.
I think we can see, and when I go out to either big conferences, summits, whatnot, also just hearing from our members about the amount of offers they get, because there are a lot of tools, such as also DLOG, that are supposed to help companies, right? And I think here it is extremely important to understand, to maybe get to know the product, and understand what the purpose is, and how it can help you, how it can support you, and then really understand the need of your company. Where are you at on the journey? What can you do in-house? What do you need extra help with? And also to make sure that they are compliant with the existing EU regulations, but that they're also aware of what's coming, and that they're able to adapt to changes also in the system, or in terms of rules, which I think you're very on top on. So I think these are some main factors that all companies need to kind of actually really sit down and make a decision, because obviously these things also cost money. So it's crucial that you find the right solution for your company and your needs, because I don't think there is a one solution fits all. And I think it's great to see a market grow with the different solutions, because I guess that makes sense. But you should do some research in terms of what solution fits me and our company, and maybe also seek some extra help. But I think a lot of you also go out and tell what you do and help them understand, because I don't know, depends on the complexity. But I know there are a lot of offers and it can be a bit overwhelming. So I think just maybe reach out to the different solutions and try to understand them, and understand that you can ask a bunch of questions because it's new, and we also receive a lot of different input. So I think that's a task that is crucial and makes sense to dig it a bit into, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, researching your needs as well, right? To see what fits to that. Yeah, exactly.
And I think also the different solutions, like companies have different solutions depending on and different packages, which makes sense. So but for sure, I mean, investing in these things are extremely important, because you will probably not be able to do it without at least in a couple of years. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Okay, let's dive into 2025, because I think there is a lot of worrying, anticipation, what we could call it, whether it's positive or negative in terms of next year. Next year, I think a lot of predictions as well. If you read reports and if you speak to the industry, there is really a great anticipation for at least the coming years, but next year as well, in terms of, again, getting prepared. How do we actually prepare? Maybe the DPP will be unveiled next year. Let's see. And there is actually a very specific question, which I might actually just ask first of all, because what is the recent updates for the DPP? I think that I speak to, of course, a lot of our customers and the industry. I don't ever have a conversation that's not about the digital product passport, because that's basically something that wraps the whole situation together, and it's something that they are 100% certain will hit you. Every company, everybody that has a product in the EU, you will be hit by this legislation. So I guess that's also why the first question here is, of course, what is the anticipation of the DPP? Do we have an update on the timeline, or can we say anything?
I mean, in terms of the timeline, they are right now looking a lot at the skeleton, let's say, both the back office part and the front office part. They have done so also for, I mean, use their time, the couple of years to do this. But they're still working on this. My last update is that we're looking into in mid 27, I believe, 2027. I have a timeline as well that I can share with you afterwards, where it's quite nicely put. But this is basically what I know as of now. It can obviously change again, but I think that batteries will be before textiles, if I'm not mistaken, and I can't remember the exact date. Let me get back to you with this, but
we can share the timeline. If you share it with me, then we'll share it with
absolutely. But that's what we're looking into right now, at least. And
that's the implementation, right? So that is when you have to have the digital product passport on.
Yeah, then it's when it's like applicable for textile companies. So mid 27.
Sort of two things that we are waiting on right now, including us as well, is one thing is to get the delegated acts for specifically, well, what will we have to do? And then of course there is the implementation period of 18 months or so. But so it's sort of like waiting for, one is what will it be? And two, when do we then have to have it on our products, right? So it's the sort of the two ones. But if you can share that timeline, then I'll share it as well with the viewers as well.
For sure. And it's also, and I don't want to make it too complex, because I don't think you need to know all of this, but there are some different stakeholders working on some different things to solve different issues and find solutions. But it's very complex once you dive into these different projects, and they're being made pilots as well, that are supposed to showcase how it can look in the end. But it is a lot of also like, how should the data, who should have access to what, and so on. And I keep saying this, but it's still not resolved 100%. So that's the only thing I can say. But I will share the timeline with you, and I will also get back to our EU member organization to get the most recent update on this.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then there's also a question about, how do you think that the forced labor regulation, I don't know how much you're into that one.
I've been more on the sideline on that, because we have a whole CSR department that takes on the whole due diligence, and so I don't want to say anything wrong. So let me
I'll note that question down as well, and then we can reply that question as well.
But we have it, I believe we have it in the overview as well. So maybe
I think it's in the overview as well, you showed. Yeah, exactly. All right, and then for the final ones, let's just, again, on an overall view, 2025, what can we expect? What's your predictions? What do you think 2025 will be?
Yeah, so we have had a lot of focus on drafting laws and making sure that we're kind of covering the different issues in the supply chain, and make sure there are no loopholes, make sure that things also kind of work together, which I'm not sure they will, but we're working on it. So there's been a lot of focus on creating and drafting different legislation. Now we're actually looking into implementation, and we can see this happening already by the end of this year with the GPSR. the textile labeling regulation, we are expecting a draft on this, like a proper, like what will it look like? They have done a lot of research, a lot of workshops. I've also worked a lot with our members on this. So I expect to see something. They're predicting, I think, Q1 next year, but let's see. The EPR, it's going to be mandatory from now the 1st of January 25 to collect and sort textiles, which will obviously create a lot more textile waste because we're not just gathering it all in the waste. So we obviously implemented it a year and a half ago in Denmark, but we might change it depending on what it will look like in other member states to make sense and adapt to the system. So that's something that will happen in Europe, let's say, and also the EPR, so the extended producer responsibility, the system for that will be set up. That's what the member states are responsible for. So we are working on that also to make sure that the system makes sense. But it will require some understanding of it's a directive, meaning it can be applied a bit differently in the different member states, which means a lot of different rules. Eco design, we're waiting for the delegated act on textiles also next year. So I hope, let's say this is a positive outlook. I think we should also end on a positive note that there will be more clarity and there will be more focus on implementation. So we're kind of maybe moving from this whole kind of overwhelming, a lot of different ideas, a lot of different thoughts, a lot of different aims, a lot of different projections to actually implementing things.
Exactly. Concrete implementation of getting ready for that one, right? But
yeah, exactly.
Hope for that. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And do you have any sort of predictions in terms of what you feel the companies are expected to be preparing next year? How do you sort of see their preparations next year? What will they focus on?
Yeah, I mean, again, maybe if you're alone in this position, always seek a network. I think I've just received positive feedback on that, or if you're a member of some kind of industry organization, because we guide our members, and I think we create some kind of comfort. I hope that's at least our task as well in knowing how to proceed. Make sure you continue gathering data. I don't think any data point is a waste or too much. So the more you can get, the better. And then definitely, collaborate closely with your suppliers. I don't think there is any harm in that. Some also choose to cut down on the amount of suppliers just to gain a better control. And you can obviously strengthen your relationship with your suppliers if you have a smaller amount. And obviously, I'm also aware there can be a lot of sub-suppliers, and it's not so easy. It's not just one point that you referred to back, but that is something that I think is a very good exercise. And then for sure, I mean, if you're getting your leadership, the board of directors, whoever on board, making them understand. We actually have quite a focus on that as well to get them understand that this is crucial, and yeah, it's what is it called? License to operate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
for
exactly.
sure.
Yeah, because it is really resourceful to just control this and both get the information in and then translating it to the business and then actually being able to comply with it and collect data and so on. So it is really fast to get license.
And if you have any experience, any issues, or even maybe more important, have solutions to something that works, we're very open to receive anything, because what you can actually get far with is to have an idea on how to solve things or change it to the better rather than criticize. So it can be a difficult practice, but that's something we're very open for.
Very good. All right. But wrapping up, let's say on a positive note, what recommendations. So let's so you already said sort of how do you expect they will prepare. Let's give like a top recommendation to end on a positive note for all of the companies out there. What should they do? What should they should go on their holidays now and very soon, but when they start the new year, what is focus points?
Yeah, I mean, I think it again depends a bit on the business model and where you're at on your journey, but gather your crucial forces. I think also there are some, let's say, organization restructuring, some sustainability consultants, managers, compliance, whatever your title is, work more closely with finance. I think that can make a lot of sense because it's quite connected to the numbers. That can be a very good idea, and that is also obviously always in collaboration with your boss or whoever is responsible for this. So I think for sure collect or gather some key stakeholders also in your companies that will help you with this, because it involves all kind of people in your company, right, to make this happen. And it's not an isolated entity anymore. It's very much everyone on board, both being educated on this. I think you can actually make quite a big impact on I don't know if you can have workshops, but I think more and more people also step into that role.
Yeah.
Educate both your colleagues on this, your leaders even more importantly, but then also your suppliers, to kind of make them understand what this is about. And then, yeah, for sure, create a timeline, seek help from us or Anya or whoever is you're in need of in terms of their skills and competencies. I don't know if there are any new hires. For sure, I think everything from textile engineers to any kind of Excel nerds, I think that's what you're in need of, for sure. And then maybe obviously these decisions are based on, should this be in-house or should it be a consultancy? For sure, that's not on my plate, but that's something that I think makes sense to look at, and then for sure, I mean, step by step, and yeah, everything will turn out okay. I think.
I feel like we're in total ending on a vision for a more community-based industry. I feel like a more like an
Sure.
industry where we can speak together, even though that we in the daily life are competitors as an industry, which is the healthy competition that has to be there in the market. But in general, when we speak about this force of tsunami of legislation and all of these requirements, let's join in and create communities where you actually can talk to each other and be inspired by each other in what do you do and what do you not do and what could we maybe do together. And
Sure.
then both internally with your suppliers, with other brands, with everyone, so that we as a strong industry can actually get through this on a more happy note.
Absolutely, yeah. And maybe one last thing, there is I don't know if you're a member of this, but the sector collaboration, it's a voluntary collaboration here in Denmark, where we're gonna prepare for the upcoming EU regulation. There are 3 different working groups, and I think they have also been a very good preparation. So if you're curious about that, I can also forward a link to Anya. That can be could be your very valuable network or preparation for 25.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Marie. This was very insightful. I will just share my screen again to show you. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. Maybe. See if I can. There we go. And I will just show you, because I wanted to just show you that we have also, as we do have a webinar each month, we of course have also always the Q&A with Pernille as well, where we dive into a bit more of course, Delog as a platform, and I'll be there as well if you have any questions in terms of ESG or legislation or anything like that, supply chain management. But this is just to show you that we will next year start off with or kick off next year with a webinar together with another solution called Text Tracer. They work a lot with supply chain management, supply chain mapping. They also have a DPP solution and to help with CSRD reporting, etc. So they're quite advanced in terms of helping you with this whole that part of your organization. And I'm very pleased that I will also be joined by Lolly's Laundry, Grant from Lolly's Laundry, who is their CSR manager. And he will dive into, well, because they work with Text Tracer, they work with Delog. Let's have a look at how they get ready for 2025. It's going to be a lot about data. It's going to be a lot about preparations, why they've chosen to work with us, etc. So it is basically an overall let's get ready. You'll get the QR code as well, of course, but otherwise it's in our website. You could just sign up for the webinar. And that's it. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining today. And thank you again, Marie. It's wonderful to see you, and see you next year, everybody.